The snow came in sideways at forward operating base Kellerman, driving hard against the corrugated walls of the briefing shed and piling in drifts against the sandbag berms that ringed the perimeter. It was the kind of cold that didn't merely chill, it pressed, insistent and relentless, through every seam in your clothing and settled in your bones like a debt. Sergeant First Class Dale Vickers stood at the gate and watched the convoy pull in. 3 Humvees, 1 flatbed, a civilian van that had absolutely no business being within 40 kilometers of this position. He watched the van's side door slide open. A woman stepped out. She was maybe 32. Slim, unhurried, dressed in a civilian cold-weather jacket that was functional without being tactical. No vest, no gear. She carried a canvas tote bag over one shoulder and a cardboard tube that looked like it contained a poster or a set of drawings. She stood in the blowing snow and looked around the compound with calm, methodical eyes, the way a carpenter looks at a room she's been asked to renovate. She glanced at him, nodded once, and turned to retrieve a second bag from the van. Vickers walked over. "Ma'am, I need your authorization papers and your escort assignment. Emily Carter." She handed him a folded set of documents without looking for them, as if they'd been waiting exactly where her hand reached. U.S. aid attached. Children's development and trauma support. Captain Harris should have my clearance. Vickers scanned the papers. Everything was in order stamps, signatures, the correct classification codes. He handed them back. "You're going to be in Sector 4. That's the education tent." "I know," she said. "I have a map." He watched her walk toward the processing station. Something made him look again, not alarm, not suspicion, just a small friction at the back of his mind, like a splinter too shallow to find. She carried both bags without any adjustment, redistributing no weight. Heavy bags by the look of them. Her stride didn't change. He filed the thought away and returned to the gate. Inside the briefing shed, Captain Marcus Harris was running the morning sitrep when his adjutant, Lieutenant Craig Norris, leaned in and murmured, "Your civilian asset arrived, sir. Emily Carter. U.S. aid education support. Put her in Sector 4 and keep her there." "Yes, sir. She's already there." Harris glanced up. "What do you mean already?" "She apparently found it herself, unescorted. She's arranging the teaching materials." Harris looked at Norris for a moment. "How did she know where Sector 4 was?" "She said she had a map." Harris returned to the sitrep. He had 6 potential flashpoints along his perimeter, a degraded satellite uplink, and a battalion commander who was going to call in 4 hours expecting actionable intelligence. He did not have time to worry about a nursery teacher. But the splinter was there for him too. Shallow. Unlocatable. She spent that first day with the children, 12 of them, ranging from 5 to 9, the sons and daughters of locally employed support staff, and the few families who had been caught too close to the shifting front line to relocate safely. She moved between them with quiet efficiency, distributing colored pencils, setting up a low folding table, teaching them a song about animals that made even the sullen 8-year-old named Joshua laugh before he caught himself and went back to scowling. Private First Class Tyler Macon watched from the doorway for a while, killing time before his shift. "You know you're on a military base," he said. "Yes," she said, without looking up from helping a small girl named Lily fold a piece of paper into something approaching a crane. "That's not really the safest place for a teacher." "Probably not." She looked up then, briefly, and he had the odd sensation of being assessed, not hostilely, not warmly, but precisely, the way a mechanic looks at an engine to identify which cylinder is misfiring. "But the children are here. So this is where the teacher needs to be." Macon lingered another moment, then left. In the doorway, he nearly walked into Corporal Dana Reeves, who had also been watching. "She's weird," Macon said. "Yeah," Reeves agreed. They didn't say it as a criticism. It came out more like a notation. That evening, Harris saw her standing alone at the northeast corner of the compound, near the antenna array. She wasn't touching anything. She was looking out past the perimeter wire toward the distant tree line, 3 kilometers away, in the blue-gray last light of the afternoon. Her hands were in her pockets. Her head moved slowly, not scanning, exactly. Something more methodical than scanning. She was calculating something. He could see it in the stillness of her. He walked over. "Miss Carter, this is a restricted area after 1700. My apologies." She turned. "I was watching the wind patterns. The snow behavior changes in gusts every 17 seconds or so, approximately. The trees to the northeast are giving very clean readings." Harris looked at her. "Why would a nursery teacher be watching wind patterns?" "I grew up in Wyoming," she said. "Big open country. You learn to read the weather." She excused herself politely and walked back toward Sector 4. Harris stood where she'd been standing and looked at the tree line. He didn't know why wind readings from 3 kilometers would matter to someone in an education tent. He went back to the briefing shed. He pulled up her file. U.S. aid clearance. Clean background. 6 years of field work in post-conflict education zones. Kosovo, Liberia. 2 rotations in Afghanistan. Legitimate. Documented. Signed off at the highest level. He read it twice. Then he set it down and told himself he had 6 flashpoints to worry about. At 0340 the following morning, the radar operator on the night watch, a wiry specialist named Ben Ochoa, picked up something on the secondary sensor array. Movement. Organized, deliberate movement. Roughly 2 kilometers northeast. He ran the pattern 3 times to make sure it wasn't atmospheric noise. Then he picked up the radio. Within 6 minutes, Captain Harris was in the operations center with his shirt buttoned incorrectly and his mind already running 3 steps ahead. What are we looking at? Multiple heat signatures, sir. Moving in a coordinated spread pattern. This isn't wildlife. Ochoa pulled up the overlay. I count between 12 and 18 targets. They're moving along the tree line and using the terrain fold here he pointed as natural concealment from our northwest sensor cluster. They know our coverage gaps, said Sergeant Major Kenneth Walsh, who had appeared at Harris's elbow. Yes, sir, they do. Walsh and Harris exchanged a look. That knowledge which gaps to exploit, which approach angles avoided the sensor array, was not publicly available. Someone had either spent considerable time in observation, or someone had told them. The compound went to elevated readiness in under 4 minutes. It was a well-drilled sequence. Weapons ready, positions taken, sniper teams up to the elevated platforms on the north and east walls. Staff Sergeant Raymond Bauer, the lead sniper, ran his pre-engagement checklist with his spotter, Private First Class Kenji Hartley. The loopholed Mark V scope was calibrated. The ATRAG-X ballistic computer was powered and synced. The targeting system was pulling in wind data from the compound's anemometer array. Bauer settled into his position on the north wall platform and began his slow breathing exercise. Then the lights went out. Not physically, the compound's generators hummed on, but every screen in the operations center went dark simultaneously. The GPS readout blanked. The sensor overlay vanished. The targeting computer on Bauer's rifle system gave a single chirp and died. Hartley's ballistic calculator was offline. Ochoa stared at his blank monitors with the expression of a man watching his house slide off a cliff. Electronic countermeasure, Walsh said flatly. They're running a jammer. A good one, Harris said, because the coverage was total and the transition from full function to 0 had taken less than half a second. This was professional-grade equipment. What do we still have? Eyes, ears, iron sights. Walsh's voice was level, the flatness of long experience converting panic into information. Our radios are on a different frequency band. We should still have internal comms, but the targeting systems are gone. From the north wall. Sir, I have visuals on movement, but I can't confirm range. The laser rangefinder is down. Harris pressed the intercom. Bauer, can you engage? A pause. Without confirmed range and wind data, sir. At this distance, I'm working blind. I'd need a computer, or I'd be guessing. Guessing at 2 kilometers, in the dark, with moving targets behind a terrain fold. The math was not favorable. Harris looked at the blank screens. Somewhere in the dark northeast, organized enemy forces were moving toward his position. His eyes were blind, his computers were dead. He had 43 personnel on this base, 12 of whom were children. Sir. Corporal Reeves appeared at the operations center door. She looked uncomfortable with what she was about to say. The civilian. Miss Carter. She's awake and she's asking to come in. Why is she awake? She said she heard the shift in engine noise when we went to elevated readiness. Harris stared at Reeves. The generators were in an insulated housing 60 meters from the nearest quarters. He kept his face neutral. Zent Herr in. Emily Carter walked into the operations center holding a mug of coffee in her canvas tote bag. She looked at the blank screens without surprise, the way a person looks at a roadblock they were already expecting. She set the mug down on the corner of a desk. How many targets? She said. Estimated 12 to 18, Harris said, watching her carefully. 2 clicks northeast. They're using the terrain fold. Not quite 2 clicks, she said. The fold is at 1.6 from your north wall. They'll be staging in the depression behind it. Given their movement pattern, she paused, and Ochoa, watching her, would later describe the pause as the kind computers make when processing the lead element is probably 1.4 kilometers. The command structure will be farther back. Standard operating distance, given their equipment sophistication, probably 2.3 to 2.4. They'll want the commander far enough to avoid the initial exchange. The operations center was quiet. How do you know any of that? Walsh said. I studied your terrain maps when I arrived, she said. Habit. She set the canvas bag on a desk and opened it. She took out a notebook, a plain, brown cover spiral notebook, and a pencil. Miss Carter, Harris said, keeping his voice careful. I need to know who you are right now. Right now, I'm the person who can give your snipers usable firing solutions. She looked at him directly. Her eyes were very steady, the kind of steady that isn't performed but simply is the bedrock kind. Do you want to have a conversation about my biography, or do you want to know that your north wall sniper is currently set up at the wrong angle? A beat of silence. What angle? He's 15 degrees too far east. The depression curves. The lead element will appear, she checked her watch, approximately 80 seconds from now, at a bearing of 347 degrees from his position, not the 332 he's probably aiming for. Harris looked at Walsh. Walsh gave him nothing back, just that flat, experienced face. Harris pressed the intercom. Bauer, shift to 347. Do it now. 90 seconds later, Bauer's voice came back. Contact. Bearing 347. How did you? Never mind that. Hold fire until ordered. Harris turned to Emily Carter, who had already opened her notebook and was writing. Numbers. Dense columns of numbers, with abbreviations beside them that Ochoa would later identify after much research as standard ballistic notation. Muzzle velocity corrections. Vertical angle calculations. Coriolis drift accounting. She was writing them faster than he could read them. Your targeting computer handles all of this automatically, she said, without looking up. Inputs from the anemometer, the rangefinder, the atmospheric sensors, it processes in milliseconds. Without it, you're back to manual calculation. The physics doesn't change, you just have to do it yourself. You can do it yourself, Harris said. It wasn't quite a question. That's why I came in, she said. Outside, the wind shifted. She stopped writing, tilted her head very slightly. She looked at the nearest window, a small reinforced pane, and watched the snow behavior against the glass. Wind dropped 2 meters per second and changed roughly 4 degrees to the northwest, she said. Your north wall shooter needs to adjust. Tell him. Macon, who had been standing near the door, looked at her, looked at Harris, and at Harris's nod, relayed it to Bauer. Then from the darkness outside came the crack of a rifle, not theirs. Enemy fire. A scream from the east wall. The attack had begun. The operations center became organized chaos, the military kind, which has more structure than it appears. Harris was coordinating the response on the east wall. Walsh was managing the internal defense. Ochoa was attempting to restore any portion of the electronic systems. Emily Carter sat at the corner desk and worked. She was not part of the chaos. She was a separate system, running in parallel. She had taped the notebook page flat against the desk surface and was writing across it in a dense, precise grid. The pencil moved fast, not frantically, but with the efficiency of someone who has done a thing so many times that the motion and the thought are the same thing. Macon stood at her elbow because Harris had told him to. What is she doing? Reeves murmured from the doorway. Math, Macon said. I can see that. What kind of math? Macon watched. He'd had a year of physics in community college. The numbers meant something to him barely, at the edges, but the way she was working, the interconnection of the calculations, the way she checked one column against another without apparent hesitation, was beyond anything he recognized as ordinary. The kind of math the computer does, he said finally. Emily looked up. I need your north wall team's rifle specifications. Barrel length, twist rate, ammunition batch number if you have it. I'll get it, Reeves said, and was gone. Emily looked at Macon. Your primary sniper, Bauer, he's good. Clean position, good breath discipline from what I could observe yesterday. She said yesterday as if she'd been conducting an ongoing assessment, which apparently she had. But he overthinks at exhale. He needs to fire at the natural pause, not push himself to exhale completely first. How do you know how he breathes? I watched him on the north wall platform at 1,800 yesterday. 22 minutes. Macon opened his mouth, closed it. Reeves returned with the specifications. Emily read them once one pass and returned to the notebook. 3 more minutes of calculation. Then she wrote a final set of numbers on a clean page, tore it out, and handed it to Macon. Give that to Bauer. These are his firing solutions for 5 distinct range brackets. The command position will be in bracket 4 or 5. The target in bracket 5 is the one he wants. Macon looked at the page. Columns of numbers. Adjustments. Precise to the decimal. How far is bracket 5? She looked at him. 1.5 miles, she said. On the north wall platform, Raymond Bauer read the numbers twice in the thin beam of a red-filtered flashlight. He had 15 years of service. He had fired in conditions that most snipers only read about. He trusted his training, his spotter, and his equipment, roughly in that order. His equipment was dead. His spotter, Hartley, read over his shoulder. "Sir, who wrote these?" "The civilian." A pause. "The teacher?" "Apparently." Hartley looked at the numbers more carefully. "These are, sir, these are actually right. The windage correction for the 2.4-kilometer range accounts for the terrain fold's effect on local wind behavior. That requires knowing the specific topography." She said she studied the maps. "Nobody calculates like this from a map. This requires days of observation." Bauer didn't answer that, because there wasn't an answer for it that made comfortable sense. He settled into his position. He was looking for the command element, the organized rear position that directed the assault. In the terrain fold's shadow, in the dark, with no electronic assist, at 1.5 miles, finding a specific target was a matter of patience and patience and patience, and then recognition of a single moment that either existed or didn't. Harris's voice came through the earpiece. "Bauer, we need the command element. They have a jammer operator and a command radio. If we take out the command, the jammer stops being coordinated. We get our systems back." "Understood, sir." "Working. 5 minutes. 10. The assault on the east wall was intensifying controlled fire, disciplined, suggesting a trained force. The command element would be positioned with line of sight to relay. There, in the far tree line, a dark shape, elevated slightly, a figure standing, not prone. Command postures are different from assault postures. They stand, they observe, they direct. Bauer acquired the target. He checked the range mentally against the bracket numbers on Emily's page. Bracket 5, 2.4 kilometers at the center of the depression with the angle. The computed firing solution was... He heard her voice in his earpiece. She was in the operations center, but Harris had patched her through. "Breathing wrong," she said. "Quiet. Not a criticism. A correction. You're pushing the exhale. Don't. Find the pause. It's already there." He almost said something. He stopped himself. He found the pause. The natural cessation between exhale and the next inhale. The body's own still point. Half a second, where nothing moves. He fired at the still point. The crack rolled out across the frozen ground and the dark tree line and the 2.4 kilometers of cold winter air and disappeared. In the operations center, Ochoa's screens flickered. One by one in rapid sequence, they came back online. GPS, sensor overlay, targeting systems, anemometer feed. The jammer had stopped. On the enemy radio frequency, which Ochoa was now monitoring, voices erupted in disordered noise, not coordinated assault communication. Panic. Harris looked at the screens. He looked at Emily Carter. She had turned the page and was already writing the next set of calculations. "There are 4 more," she said. "They'll attempt a secondary assault in approximately 8 minutes when they reorganize. These are the positions they'll most likely use." The secondary assault did not materialize in 8 minutes. It materialized in 11, slightly delayed, from 2 of the 4 positions Emily had identified. By then, Bauer had her firing solutions. Hartley had them memorized. 2 targets were eliminated in 4 minutes. The remaining force fell back. By 0530, FOB Kellerman was secure. The adrenaline left the compound slowly, the way water drains from a sink, first fast, then in the last reluctant trickle. People sat where they happened to be standing when it became clear the fight was over. Macon sat on a sandbag near the operations center door. Reeves sat on an equipment case. Ochoa sat at his console staring at the restored screens as if needing visual confirmation they were real. Emily Carter was standing at the window with her coffee, which had gone cold an hour ago. Harris walked to her. He stood beside her for a moment, looking at the lightening horizon, the very beginning of gray dawn seeping into the eastern sky. "Who are you?" he said, not hostile, not sharp, the tone of a man who genuinely needs an answer. "I told you, I'm a teacher. Emily Carter, USAID, 6 years of field work." He paused. "That file is real. I've confirmed it at 2 levels. It is real, but it's not complete." She looked at the horizon. She didn't answer immediately, and when she did, it was sideways, not evasive, but careful, like someone selecting the right tool. "I was different things before I was a teacher," she said. Walsh had appeared somewhere behind them, not intruding, just present. He spoke quietly. 12 years ago, there was a unit, very small, off the books, trained specifically for no-tech operations, the assumption being that any advanced enough adversary can and will defeat electronic systems." He paused. They were trained to function without any of it. Navigation by terrain and stars, communication by physical dead drop, marksmanship by pure calculation. Emily said nothing. The unit was compromised on its final operational deployment, Walsh continued. An intelligence leak. The entire team was lost. Officially, 7 people, all listed as killed in action. Silence. That unit, Harris said slowly, had a call sign. Walsh nodded. Ghost Sparrow. Emily drank the last cold inch of her coffee and set the mug on the windowsill. The children will be awake at 0700, she said. I need to prepare for the morning session. She did not sleep that day. When the children arrived at the education tent at 0700, she was there, the low table arranged, the colored pencils sorted by color into 7 groups, a new song ready. She moved between them with the same quiet efficiency, the same patient attention to the specific child in front of her, not the group, but the individual, and if her eyes were slightly more distant than usual, none of the children were old enough to notice, and she didn't let it reach her hands or her voice. But at 1300, when the children went for lunch, she sat at the low table alone, and she was somewhere else entirely. 12 years was a long time to have been dead. She had been 24 when she went into the unit recruited from Army marksmanship and put through a training program so specific that it was almost taxonomic, designed to produce exactly one kind of person. Someone whose primary instrument was the mind, calculation, observation, pattern recognition. No technology was a crutch. Technology failed. Technology was compromised, jammed, hacked, flooded, frozen, dropped. The human mind, properly trained, did not fail in the same ways. It failed in different ways, but those ways could be addressed through discipline and practice, and the building of cognitive habits so deep they approached reflex. She had been very good at it. She had been, by the end, the best in the unit. That was not self-assessment. It was the assessment of people who didn't give compliments. The unit's designation was never written down anywhere that survived. The individuals in it were drawn from service branches that didn't share records with each other. The entire construct was designed to be deniable, which meant it was also designed to be abandoned. When the compromise came and she had known something was wrong for 3 weeks before it happened, had known from small inconsistencies in their operational support, wrong timing on resource deliveries, answers that were slightly too smooth they were in the field. Deployed. Committed. She had been the only one positioned far enough from the center of the collapse to extract. She had walked out of that country with nothing. No ID, no money, nothing. She'd built Emily Carter from scratch over the following 2 years not to hide from authorities, but because there was no record to return to. Her old identity was officially a casualty. The unit didn't exist. There was no mechanism to reconstitute her. She had built something new, something that wasn't a lie. She had studied, qualified, worked. She had learned, genuinely learned, to be a teacher. She was good at it. But the calculations never stopped. The habit of reading wind and terrain and distance and angle was so deeply written in her that it operated whether she asked it to or not. She walked into Fob Kellerman, and within 40 minutes had unconsciously mapped every elevation change, computed the approximate sensor coverage gaps, noted the wind behavior at the northeast corner, and identified 3 positions outside the perimeter that offered significant tactical advantage to a patient enemy. She couldn't not do it. It was the way she was made. She had not fired a rifle in 4 years. Before last night, she had not expected to feel what she felt when she heard the shot and saw the screens come back online. She had expected relief, tactical satisfaction, perhaps. What she felt was older and heavier than either of those. The feeling of a weight she'd set down long ago, lifted briefly, and now had to set down again. They came again at midnight. This time there were more of them. The after-action intelligence suggested that the Commander Harris's team had neutralized was the second-ranking element of a larger force, and his death had promoted someone more aggressive. The jammer came online again first. Then the perimeter sensors began showing movement not from one direction but from 3. Harris was in the operations center when the screens went dark for the second time. He looked at the blank monitors. He pressed the intercom. Carter, operations center. Now. She arrived in 2 minutes. She was fully dressed. She had not been sleeping. She set her notebook on the desk without being asked. 3 approach vectors, she said. East, northwest, and a diversion from the south. The south is the diversion light personnel, high noise. The real assault will be east and northwest simultaneously. How are you? I could hear the patrol patterns changing at 2,300. The south element has been making noise for 40 minutes. Real assaults don't announce themselves. Walsh, who had come to trust her at a velocity that surprised him, was already on the intercom to the wall teams. "What do you need?" Harris said. "Your full sniper complement. All 4 positions. I need their range bracket information, current weather conditions, and someone who can relay my calculations to each position simultaneously." Reeves stepped forward. "I can coordinate the relay. How fast can you relay to 4 positions? If they're listening, fast." Emily looked at her. Something passed between them, an assessment on Emily's side, a steadiness on Reeves's. "Good," Emily said. "Let's start." What followed was 40 minutes that Macon would describe, years later, to people who wouldn't entirely believe him, as watching someone conduct an orchestra in the dark. She sat at the desk and she calculated. Not one target, not one range bracket, but a shifting, evolving tactical picture. 4 sniper positions, multiple targets at different ranges and angles and elevations, wind conditions that varied by compass direction, a temperature that had dropped 4 degrees since the initial assault began and was affecting bullet drop accordingly. She kept it all in her head and on the page simultaneously. When Reeves relayed her corrections, they came in the terse, stripped-down language of someone who understood that every unnecessary word was time wasted. Position 3. Shift left 7 degrees. New range 1.1. Drop correction +4. Position 1. Wind change. Add 3 right. Hold depth. Position 2. Target mobile, moving northeast. Lead by 11. Bauer, on the north wall, had stopped being skeptical approximately 6 minutes into the first engagement. Now he simply listened and executed. The calculations she gave him were right. He could feel their rightness the way a solution that truly accounts for all the variables feels when it's applied. The shot goes where it should go, and the physics of it makes sense in a way that improvised shooting never quite does. At the 30-minute mark, with the east assault suppressed and the northwest element beginning to fragment, Emily paused. She held completely still. Macon, who had been watching her for most of the engagement, felt the quality of the stillness and took a half step back without knowing why. She was looking at the window. The snow behavior. The way a particular eddy of wind was moving the flakes in the upper left pane. "Position 4, she said very quietly. "Don't fire." Reeves relayed it. Position 4 acknowledged, confused. "There's a sniper in the tree line," Emily said. 60 meters left of their last reported position. He's been watching position 4 for the last 4 minutes. If position 4 fires, they'll take a return shot from someone who's already acquired them. Harris leaned over. "How do you know?" "The snow disturbance pattern at the 340-degree bearing is slightly inconsistent with the wind. Something is breaking the air in that direction, something that isn't a tree." She picked up her pencil. "Position 2. I'm sending you a new target. Bearing 340, range approximately 1.8. This is a priority target." She wrote the firing solution. Reeves relayed it. 11 seconds later, the shot. 40 seconds after that, no more inconsistency in the snow pattern at 340 degrees. "Position 4 is clear," Emily said. At 0115, the monitoring system restored now. Running, pulling in everything it could reach, picked up something on the enemy tactical frequency. Ochoa's head came up slowly from the console. "Sir," he said. His voice had a particular quality, flat in the way that voices get when the mind is processing something it doesn't yet have a framework for. "You need to hear this." Harris crossed to the console. Ochoa played the intercept. It was in a language Harris didn't speak, but the analyst who had been brought online via satellite did. There was a pause while the analyst translated. Then, they're saying it's her. They're saying. The analyst's voice changed texture slightly. "They're saying Ghost Sparrow is alive." The operations center was quiet. "They know who she is," Hartley said from the doorway. He had come down from the north wall when the northwest assault broke. "How do they know who she is?" No one answered, because the implication of the answer was uncomfortable. Harris turned to Emily. She was looking at the window again. Her face was neutral. But something had shifted behind her eyes, not fear, but something older than fear. Recognition. "The people who compromised my unit 12 years ago," she said, "are apparently still operational. And they know you're here. They knew I was here before tonight, I think." She picked up her pencil, turned it in her fingers once. "That's probably why they came." The room absorbed this. "They came for you," Walsh said. "I was a reason, yes. Not the only reason this base has strategic value. But I was a factor they were perhaps expecting to resolve." Harris looked at her steadily. "And instead you resolved them." She set the pencil down. "They'll try once more," she said. "Within the next 2 hours. A small element. Very precise, targeting this building. They'll know that the operations center is where I've been working. They'll have calculated my position the same way I calculate theirs. A pause. I need to not be in this building. Harris didn't ask for an elaboration, he understood it. Where do you need to be? She pointed to the terrain map on the far wall. To a position on the south wall, the diversion wall, the one they'd ignored all night. There, with a rifle. She looked at him. And I need to work alone. Walsh found her the rifle. A different model than Bauer's older, fully mechanical, no electronic components to jam. She checked it with the practiced economy of someone checking a tool they know very well. Barrel clear, chamber clean, action smooth. She accepted 2 magazines and put one in her jacket pocket and loaded the other. She walked to the south wall and climbed to the position a sandbagged elevated platform and lay prone. She did not need binoculars. She watched the darkness with her eyes and the wind with her peripheral attention and the snow with everything else. Behind her, at a careful distance, Macon sat on the platform steps. Harris had told him to stay back. He stayed back. But he watched. They came at 0210, not many 3, positioned to triangulate on the operations center from outside the wire. Professionals, patient. They had waited out the main engagement, let the larger force absorb the attention and the response, and slipped into their positions during the noise. They didn't know about her. They should have. She acquired the first one by the quality of darkness, the way a human presence modifies the available light differently from a tree or a snow berm. Range approximately 600 meters. Not a difficult shot in standard conditions. In these conditions, with this weapon, without any instrument except her understanding of the physical world, it required 3 specific adjustments she computed in the silence of her own mind. She fired. She was already moving to the second before the sound of the first shot had finished crossing the compound. The second was harder, not the shot, but the finding. They had heard the first shot and one of them was moving. She tracked the movement by the disturbance in the snow's surface, the subtle compression wave that a running person creates in deep snow. Visible if you know how to look. She found the pause at which he would stop. She fired at the pause. The third had stopped, entirely gone flat, eliminated his profile, disappeared into the ground. This was good training. She respected it. She held still and waited. It took 6 minutes. He moved. They always moved, eventually. The cold was absolute, and the ground was frozen. And a person lying in snow at this temperature begins to lose fine motor control within minutes. He shifted position. She fired. Then she lay still for 90 seconds, watching, confirming. Then she got up, handed the rifle to Macon, who had come up the steps during the third shot, and walked back toward the education tent. Behind her, on the tactical frequency, Ochoa heard the last transmission from the enemy element. 3 words, which the analyst translated in a flat voice. It was her. Dawn came in properly at 0620, cold and white and indifferent. The compound was quiet. Not the emptied quiet of exhaustion, though that was present too, but the peculiar stillness that follows resolved violence, when the body understands that immediate danger has passed and begins the slow return to ordinary human concerns. Harris found her in the education tent. She was arranging the colored pencils again, sorting them by color into 7 groups. He stood in the entrance for a moment. The children will be here at 0700, she said. I know. She continued sorting. He came inside and stood at the low table. I've spoken to my command, he said. They want a full debrief. And there are people above my command who apparently want considerably more than a debrief. I imagine so. Emily. He waited until she looked at him. They're talking about reinstating your file. Your actual file. Recognition. Official status. The full picture. She held a green pencil for a moment, looking at it. They're talking about bringing you back, he said. I heard you. You'd be an asset, unlike Captain Harris. Her voice was quiet. Not sharp. Not cold. Something simpler than both. I have 12 children coming through that door in 40 minutes. Joshua is 9 and he can't sleep without waking screaming because he watched something happen to his family that I won't describe to you. Lily is 6 and she's just learned that people can be sources of comfort rather than only sources of danger. There's a boy named Daniel who hasn't spoken in 3 weeks. But yesterday he said the word for blue in his language when he picked up a crayon. She set the green pencil down. What I did last night, I can do it. I've proven that. But it doesn't become something different from what it is just because I can do it. Harris was quiet. The war doesn't need me, she said. The war has technology and satellites and targeting computers that will be back online tomorrow and better models next quarter. The children, she picked up the green pencil again, placed it in the correct group. The children need people who show up the same way every day. That's a different kind of work. It's not less. Harris looked at the low table, the pencils sorted by color, the child-sized chairs. He thought about what she'd done in the past 6 hours, the calculations that no system should have been able to perform without hardware. The 3 targets on the south wall, each at range, in the dark, alone. The enemy forces that knew her name and came anyway and left anyway. He didn't know how to fit those 2 things, the colored pencils and the south wall, into a single picture of a person. Maybe that was the point. Maybe a person wasn't required to be a single coherent picture. If you ever, he started. I know how to find you, she said. If I ever need to. He nodded once and left. Walsh found him outside. She's not going to come back in, Walsh said. It was not a question. Walsh looked at the education tent. Through the canvas wall, the faint sounds of preparation chairs moving, materials being arranged. 12 years, he said, and she builds this. A pause. Seems like a fair trade. Harris didn't answer. He looked at the tent a moment longer, then turned back to the operations center, where screens were running and reports needed filing and the machinery of his particular work required his attention. The children arrived at 0659. Lily came first, as she always did, and went immediately to her usual chair. Joshua came third, walking with the deliberate carefulness of a child who has learned that the world is unpredictable and has decided that measured movement is the appropriate response. Daniel came last, hood up, hands in his pockets. Emily had a new song ready. Something about winter and animals and the way the world kept going even when things were cold and hard. At the 3rd verse, Daniel's lips moved slightly. Not full participation. The beginning of something. She didn't make a point of it. She kept singing, kept the same pace, let the moment be unremarkable, which was exactly the right thing to do. At 0800, Macon was writing his incident report when Reeves appeared at his elbow. She's gone, Reeves said. He looked up. What? Carter. She's not in Sector 4. The civilian van is still here, she didn't take it. She just Reeves made a small gesture. Gone. They walked to Sector 4 together. The education tent was arranged for the children, who were at breakfast materials ready, chairs in their correct places, a song written on a piece of paper clipped to the tent pole where a child tall enough could read it. On the low table, where the colored pencils usually sat sorted into 7 groups, there was a notebook. Brown-covered, spiral-bound. Macon picked it up. He opened it. Page after page of calculations. Ballistic tables computed by hand. Wind adjustment formulas. Atmospheric correction sequences. Range estimation methods that required nothing except observation, time, and a willingness to learn the physical world in extraordinary detail. The last page had 4 words written at the top in the same precise hand. For anyone who needs it. That was all. Walsh read the incident report 3 times. Then he filed it under a classification level high enough that it would not be read by anyone without a specific need to know for the next 25 years. In the section that required him to describe the civilian assets contribution, he wrote a single line. He wrote it carefully. In the specific language of people who deal in facts and need their facts to carry weight. Performed manual ballistic calculation under electronic denial conditions. Achieved confirmed effect at ranges exceeding standard capability parameters. Demonstrated knowledge and technique consistent with advanced, specialized training. Identity unconfirmed. Current location unknown. He read it back. Then, in the margin, in his own handwriting, not the report's formal type, he added 4 more words. The kind that didn't belong in a military document, and that he would not be able to explain if asked about them. But she was real. He underlined it once. Then he filed the report and went to find coffee. Because the morning was cold and the generators were running and the compound was quiet, and the children in Sector 4 were finishing breakfast and heading back to the education tent where someone, apparently, was going to need to explain to them that their teacher was not going to be here today. And because there was a notebook on the low table that nobody had touched yet, and it contained the kind of knowledge that took a lifetime to build and a moment to give away, and the world had a way of not noticing those moments until long after they had passed. Outside, the snow was still falling. The wind moved in the trees at the northeast perimeter. Every 17 seconds, it changed direction. Nobody was watching it. But somewhere, at a distance that required calculation to even estimate, a woman who had been dead on paper for 12 years was walking through the snow in a direction that only she knew, carrying nothing except what she'd already given away and what had always, quietly, been enough. Some legends don't fight wars. They end them. Then they go back to work.